the world of elder law. And so I love to speak on it, and hopefully I won't throw too much information at you, but I definitely want to make sure you guys are informed and take away all the important things. So the title of this presentation is My Spouse Needs Long-Term Care, Now What? It's here. 9% will need it for more than 5 years. The average stay right now is 30 months. So, and if you're familiar at all with what long-term care costs, it's around $185 to $90 a day right now. For someone that's in for more than 3 years, that gets quite expensive. So there are 5 ways to pay for nursing home care. And again, that's skilled 24/7 care. The first way is out-of-pocket private pay. So average cost, like I just said, is about $185 to $190 a day. With COVID right now, that number it's kind of all over the board. I've got some facilities up near Lake of the Ozarks that I work with that are as high as $240 a day. And then I've got some facilities that are in some of the smaller communities down here, more rural, where it's more like, $160 a day. So it's kind of all over the board. And I think a lot of that is just staffing issues. Some of the facilities have empty beds. Some of the facilities are on wait lists, depending upon what sort of COVID restrictions they've put in place. So, but for the most part, you can count on around $185 a day. Our area down in Springfield, I know some of you may be joining me from other parts of the state, but is around $6,200 a month. So when you get up into St. Louis and Kansas City, the facilities are obviously a lot more. So that's the first way. The second way is long-term care insurance. And there are a lot of different types of policies out there. Some of those are hybrid type policies that maybe pay for up to a certain amount. If you don't use them, then they have a life insurance rider. Missouri has what's called a matching program now. I've only seen one of these policies. Primarily, I think they're very cost prohibitive, but those types of policies are they're an incentive type program for someone to purchase long-term care insurance. And then once you've exhausted that policy, and they have to pay 5 years, then the state allows you to save an additional amount of your assets before you are looking at that Medicaid benefit. So I wish I saw long-term care insurance more. I'm a big proponent of it. I love to see it. My philosophy on long-term care insurance is not that you're signing yourself up to go into a nursing home someday. I view it as a way to actually stay out of a nursing home. And so the reason for that is a lot of these policies will cover in-home health care, and they will cover assisted living. And the statistics show that folks that utilize those levels of care tend to avoid a nursing home much longer, if not at all, because they get care that they need, and so they don't have some sort of catastrophic event that lands them in a nursing home. So I love to see long-term care insurance. Home and community based waiver program, that's part of our Medicaid program. I'm not really going to get much into that today. I'm going to mainly talk on our vendor program. So the third way is veterans benefits. Veterans, a lot of our veterans, I hear them say that their plan, if they need long-term care, is to go to our facility here in Mount Vernon. And it is a lovely facility. It's a great facility. It is a very full facility. And I've had veterans be on the wait list there for years. So I always say, let's look at it. I think it's a great option, but I wouldn't count on that. There is some veterans benefits out there for widows of wartime veterans as well. So I just kind of want to put a plug for them. I'm not going to get into that too far today. I can do a whole talk on veterans benefits. I am VA certified. So if you have any questions about that later, feel free to contact me and I can try to help you out. Then we've got Medicare as our fourth way to pay for long-term care. And this is a very temporary solution. So this is your health insurance, and it will only cover some rehabilitation. So if you have a 3-night qualifying hospital stay and are discharged from a facility for some rehabilitation, you will get some Medicare coverage. It's up to 120 days at most, and it kind of depends on your supplement. Typically you get 21 days and then you have a copay that kicks in. So the moral of the story is don't rely on your Medicare coverage for your long-term care. And then the fifth and final way is Medicaid. And that's what I'm going to focus on in the next little bit. So with the Medicaid benefit, this is not your health insurance. This is actually money earmarked by the state and federal government for long-term care. And it matters if you're single or married as to how you qualify for this program. Every state gets to put their own rules on it. So, one of the myths I'm going to talk about later is, don't rely on what somebody in Oklahoma or Arkansas or Kansas has told you about, their nursing home experience, because Medicaid is different in Missouri than those states. So this is very Missouri specific today. So when you're looking at the Medicaid program, a lot of people think that, well, I've got to spend all my money down, or I have to be, broke or destitute, or whatever word you want to use there. And that's not exactly true. So our Medicaid program in Missouri is pretty friendly in terms of watching out for that spouse at home. And so there's a lot of things that can be done to protect them and make sure that they don't become impoverished. When you're looking at the Medicaid program, the first thing you want to do is look at the income, and you're only looking at the income from the person going into the nursing home. You're not looking at the spouse that's still at home. They actually don't care about that person's income. So as long as the spouse that's going into the nursing home does not have enough to private pay, then they're qualified from an income standpoint, okay? So the next thing we move on to are assets. So there are countable assets and there are exempt assets. And you can only have a certain amount of countable assets when looking at how to apply for the Medicaid program or qualify for the Medicaid program. So let's look at what's exempt. Your home and all of the land surrounding it is exempt up to $600,000. This is really a big nuance here in our part of the state, because we do have a lot of farms and we do have a lot of folks that have land on the other side of the road, or I have a lake house, or I have a cabin, or I have some hunting land. And the rules are very clear that it's your home and all of the land surrounding it. So if you have a road going through your property, that's going to be something we're going to have to deal with. That's not just a cut and dry, exemption. So you can have a vehicle. Actually, each spouse can have a vehicle. Those are exempt. Your personal property is exempt. Irrevocable prepaid funeral plans are exempt, and personal property, and even jewelry, those types of things are exempt. And then your term life insurance is exempt. So what's countable? So what's countable are your bank accounts, stocks, bonds, IRAs, savings bonds, certificates of deposits, so CDs, secondary homes, secondary pieces of property, additional vehicles, more than $1,500 in whole life insurance, and then boats, boat motors, those types of things. Any sort of additional vehicles are going to be countable. So if you have excess countable assets, there's a lot of things that can be done, and I would recommend not letting a nursing home or someone like that deal with that situation. But there are a lot of things within the rules that as an attorney we can do to try to protect things. So the goal is to get you down to $5,000, and that's the person in the nursing home. They can only have $5,000. The person that is at home, the well spouse, can have $129,000. A lot of people are really surprised by that number. So the first step is adding up all of the countable assets for a married couple, and then doing what's called a division of assets. And that is dividing things down the middle. And I'm going to walk you through an example here in a second. So you divide down the middle, and then, if it's $100,000 or $200,000, then it's, $100,000 on each side. And then remember that well spouse at home gets to keep $129,000. So if she has too much, we have to do something with what she has too much of. And same thing on the side where we have the person going into the nursing home. And normally I have a board, like a whiteboard, I draw this all on, and it's a little easier to illustrate. So it's a little harder over Zoom. But so with the money that we have too much of, what are things we can do? Well, we always look to purchase. We always look to, one, pay off debt. Two, we look to purchase things that either spouse would need. The other thing, if they don't have prepaid burial plans, then we purchase that. But you don't want to spend your money buying countable assets. You only want to buy exempt assets. One of the common tools we use is what's called a Medicaid compliant annuity. And this is not an annuity that you would call up your Edward Jones agent or someone like that and purchase. It's not an investment. It is the only type of annuity the state of Missouri allows you to own. And it is an exempt asset. The reason you're allowed to own this is because the state of Missouri writes the rules on what makes this annuity exempt. It has to be actuarially sound. It has to be irrevocable. It has to make even payments to the well spouse at home. And then the state of Missouri is listed as a beneficiary on this annuity. And then, so that's kind of that, aha, now I get it. Now I know why we can have this annuity. All that means is the state of Missouri gets reimbursed if both spouses pass before the annuity pays out. For that reason, we run them very short. We run them 6 months. And so what happens is you've got this excess money that you had too much of. Let's say it's $100,000. We buy a Medicaid compliant annuity, and then it turns it into income for the well spouse at home. And they get that $100,000 back in 6 months. So that is called crisis planning. And I do a lot of that. And so that's for those folks that have had a health event occur quickly, unexpectedly, or they've done no sort of pre-planning. That's what we do. It's kind of a last minute thing that we can jump on and run with it and get it done pretty quick. It's not something you go out and you buy now. It's not something that any sort of financial advisor is going to be excited about you having. It's something we do at the last minute in order to turn our excess assets into countable or into income for our well spouse at home. So that is crisis planning, okay? Then we have pre-planning. So when we're talking about Medicaid, we talk about income, assets, and we talk about gifting. That's the third prong. So gifting is the 5-year look back period. A lot of people are familiar with this. You'll hear, oh, give your assets away to your kids or put your kids' names on everything, or, that's where that's coming from. So what the state of Missouri does is on your Medicaid application, they ask, have you given anything away in the last 5 years or sold anything for less than fair market value? And if you have, then that meets the definition of a gift, and it has to be reported to the state. Pre-planning is trying to get ahead of that 5 years. There is a couple different ways to do that. There is something called a Medicaid Asset Protection Trust. This is an irrevocable trust. The state requires certain things be in this trust. They are not a one-size-fits-all tool. I'm very particular about when I do them, primarily because a lot of people don't understand how they work. So when you are setting up this type of trust, you are actually moving assets out of your name into the name of this irrevocable trust. At the point those assets go in, they are no longer yours. We actually get a separate tax ID number for that type of trust. You are not the trustee of that trust. You can choose who you want to be the trustee of that trust. And a lot of folks will choose their children or a trusted individual. But the big thing to know about that type of trust is if you're putting money in that type of trust, you're not allowed to use that money for your day-to-day needs going forward. It literally is put over there, set aside, and you can't touch it. Your beneficiaries can touch the funds, but you're not a beneficiary of that trust. So if you've named your children, then they can access the funds, but you cannot. So I always say if you've been told to do that type of trust or you've gotten something in the mail, that's a great option. I would recommend getting a second opinion and just talking to an elder law attorney, making sure you fully understand how that type of trust would work in your situation. They can be great. Don't get me wrong. There are situations where they can be great, but I've seen a lot of people get into those and they don't quite understand how they work. And then they don't follow the rules. And then lo and behold, we have a health event and we're looking at long-term care and we now don't qualify for Medicaid because we didn't play by the rules. So I typically do them with farms, and that's extra real estate, century farms, those types of things. That's where they're most primarily, I think, you're safer in using those. But so if you have made any other types of gifts in the last 5 years, so let's say you've given just straight out written checks to the kids for, at the advice of your CPA or something like that, those are all gifts. If they were done out inside that 5-year window, those have to be reported to Medicaid. So if you have done any of that in the 5 years, the state will assess what's called a penalty. The penalty says you have to pay for X amount of months based on the amount of the gift. So, and this is a formula and it changes every year. So let's say we have $100,000 that's been gifted to our kids over the last 3 years. And then we have something happen and we need long-term care and we go to apply for Medicaid. We're going to have a 14.5-month penalty. So what that means is we have to private pay for 14.5 months before the state of Missouri will say we're eligible for Medicaid. So if someone has told you to gift, if someone has told you to, put other people's names on your assets, I would get a second opinion about that, or have a strategy going forward. I have seen a lot of folks over the years get into a bind. They've, their CPA has said, go ahead and give $15,000 every year to the kids. And then this goes on for 4 years. And then lo and behold, mom and dad only have $100,000 left when dad needs nursing home care. And we don't have enough to continue to private pay through our penalty period. So these are just some of the kind of, pitfalls of just, if you're listening to the neighbor or you get something in the mail, I can't emphasize enough the importance of talking with an attorney about it. Something else I want to touch on with Medicaid, with this Medicaid benefit that's really important is the Missouri Medicaid rules are all, like I said, looking out for the spouse at home. So remember when I first started getting into this topic, I said that the well spouse at home gets to keep $129,000 in countable assets. Well, that well spouse at home also has what's called a spousal allotment. So this is income. This is making sure that the well spouse at home has around $2,100 a month in income. So I will work with families a lot of the times where maybe mom was a homemaker or something like that, and her Social Security is, $1,000 a month, $800 a month, and dad goes into a nursing home. In doing all of the Medicaid application, the division of assets, the other thing we're going to be doing is making sure we get her enough income. So Medicaid's a payer of last resort. So when dad goes on Medicaid in the nursing home is going to take his income every single month and mom's going to be left with hers, unless she doesn't have the minimum monthly maintenance amount, which is the $2,100. So that's always something else we want to look at when we're going through this Medicaid program. And I will say, kind of going back to the veterans topic, I have a lot of veterans that will elect to go the Medicaid route over looking at VA benefits, because Medicaid does a better job of looking out for the well spouse at home than the VA does. And so a lot of my veterans who would maybe be able to go down to Mount Vernon or something and pay $2,400 a month or look at aid and attendance benefits end up going the Medicaid route because it provides more income for their spouse at home. So it's always good to kind of look at all the options. A couple side notes on the crisis part of Medicaid and the 5-year look back period. There are 2 exceptions to that 5-year look back period that I think are worth noting. And a lot of folks don't realize this, but if you have a disabled child you can gift an unlimited amounts of assets to that disabled child prior to applying for Medicaid, and that 5-year penalty will not apply. However, I would be very cautious about doing this because you want to look at the type of benefits that that disabled child is on. So if they're on Social Security, disability where they had a strong work history and then became disabled, they're probably on Medicare and they don't have any restrictions. But if you have a child that's been disabled since birth, and they're likely on what's called SSI, and they're probably receiving Medicaid benefits as well, then you cannot gift assets to that child or they will lose eligibility. So just something worth looking at. Again, I would talk with an attorney about it before getting into any sort of gifting at all. And then the other exception is what we call the child caregiver exception. So I use this one a lot. It's very common for a child to move in with a parent and provide care. It's very common. And so if that happens, that child, the home can be gifted to that child with no 5-year look back period. And it's the home only in that case. So we do have to prove to the state that that child has been providing care. We have to get evidence from community members and affidavits from doctors. But that's one way to move the home over into the child's name without a penalty. So I said I was going to walk you through an example of crisis planning with Medicaid. And I'll just run through a pretty simple example. So let's say we have a husband and wife, and husband is going into the nursing home, and there is, we'll say $400,000 in countable assets. So this could be a combination of IRAs, CDs, stocks, what have you. And so the first thing we're going to do is a division of assets. And so with that division of assets, husband and wife are going to each have $200,000 on each side. Okay. So the husband going into the nursing home, he has $200,000. He can only have $5,000 in countable assets. So he has what's called a $195,000 spend down. The well spouse at home, she gets to keep $129,000. So she has a $71,000 spend down. Okay. So between the two of them, we have $195,000 plus $71,000. Too much. So this is $266,000. So the first thing we're going to look at, is there any debt or anything that we need to pay off? Maybe there's a mortgage on the house, and I don't get into financial advice. Sometimes I have people that, yes, we have a mortgage, but we don't want to pay it off. We have a great interest rate, or we just really want to hang on to that liquid. We really want to make sure we have that safety net there in case something happens. And so we just have a conversation about what they can do. And then ultimately at the end of the day, it's their decision on what they want to do with the funds. But so $266,000, and like I said, this is maybe coming from IRAs or CDs, stocks, bonds. It could just all be sitting in a checking account. Who knows? So 9 times out of 10, what we do is we purchase what's called a Medicaid compliant annuity. And that is that annuity I talked about earlier. And all it's going to do is flip this $266,000 that we have too much of into income for the well spouse at home. So this annuity would run 6 months, and each month the wife at home would receive a payment of $44,333, and she would receive 6 payments of that, and that is income. So it's not necessarily taxable income because it was all principal when it purchased the annuity, but in the eyes of Medicaid, it's income. And remember, I said they don't care how much income the well spouse at home has. So that is, and so this is all sent up to the state. The state of Missouri looks at the Medicaid application, the division, we provide all the documentation, and then the annuity contract, and then they put their stamp of approval on it. And so that allows the well spouse at home to keep those access funds. After that division of assets is done, she can have whatever. The state of Missouri doesn't care. They only want to make sure that the person that's in the nursing home continues to stay at that 5,000 cap or under. It's not uncommon for us to do Medicaid planning like this for someone that has long-term care insurance. I see a lot of long-term care insurance policies that don't pay much, they're older policies, or they don't have an inflation rider. So if you do have long-term care insurance and you have questions about, is this good? Is it enough? I have people that talk about getting rid of it. And I'm always happy to sit down and look at the policy and kind of give my opinion. I'm not an insurance expert, but I can tell you how it would apply if you or your spouse need a nursing home care. And if it doesn't pay enough, then sometimes we are looking at doing this type of Medicaid planning as well. So just because you have long-term care insurance, I guess, doesn't mean that you're kind of, you don't have to be aware of this. The things that I've talked to you about so far, as far as Medicaid planning, it's called the practice of law. And I bring that up because what we just went through is not anything a nursing home can do for you. It's not anything, the Office on Aging or a senior center can do for you. They can only take you so far as doing a division of assets. And then beyond that, they will ask you to private pay. And nursing homes are a business just like anyone else, and they prefer private pay dollars over Medicaid dollars. And so they are there to provide care. They are there to take care of your loved one. They're not there to save you money. They're not there to perform legal services. So I always say, I caution people about allowing a nursing home to do their Medicaid application because there are a lot of things that can be done on the legal side that won't necessarily be done on, in the office of a nursing home administrator. Okay, so that is me running through the 5 ways to pay for nursing home care and the, division of assets piece for a married couple. One of the questions I get asked a lot is, well, when should we do this? When should we have these conversations? Well, it's never too early is the way I put it. I encourage my clients that I catch early enough, if they're healthy enough and it's worth it to go look at long-term care. I think it's a great tool. I think it's a great way to preserve assets. If you have long-term care insurance and it pays for several years, sometimes we'll look at doing gifting of assets when you go on claim, because we're not as worried about that 5-year look back period, because we know we have an insurance policy that's going to cover a good portion of that time. But every situation is different. Everybody's, income, assets, health is different. Family dynamics are really huge when you get into talking about some of this. I haven't really touched on it yet, but in my law partner, Elise, I think she's going to be doing the next talk and she'll touch more on it. But durable powers of attorney, really, really important in this area, because I'm typically working with a child or a loved one who, because, if we have someone in a nursing home, a lot of the times the spouse is overwhelmed with what's going on with them. So I'm sitting down with children, and if they don't have a durable power of attorney, number one, I can't talk to them. Or if they have a durable power of attorney that's not very good or doesn't allow them to do some of the things we've talked about today, then my hands are kind of tied. So Elise is going to talk more about that in the next one. So I would encourage you to tune in for that, because I think there's definitely some overlap in these two areas. But okay, so I'm going to move on to some of the myths. I think I'm doing okay on time here. Some of the myths that I've kind of hinted at as I've talked through with Medicaid, but I'm going to go back in and touch on these. So I hear a lot of the times that I've put my kids' names on everything. So I'll get a deed in and they've put their kids' names on the house. Well, if you did that for estate planning purposes, that's a terrible estate plan. There's liability issues that go along with doing that, but putting your kid's name on the house can result in gifting issues, and it can also result in that asset not being protected. So I would never recommend anyone do that. There's liability issues associated with that. And I think there's just a lot of false information out there about that. Giving your assets away. This is a myth. How do I qualify for Medicaid? We'll just give your assets away. Well, it's not really that simple, as we just talked about. We do have a 5-year look back period. And what are we giving away? Do we have a disabled child in the family and we just put assets in their name and now they're going to lose their SSI or their Medicaid? So, or have we given assets away and now we need nursing home care and we only did that 2 years ago and now we're disqualified? And now that child has gone and spent all that money we gave them. And these are, I'm telling you things from situations that I see more often than I'd like to. So that is a planning myth and I would not recommend it. Another myth, I hear this a lot. Well, I have a prenup. So my wife and I, this is a second marriage. We got a prenup and her assets are hers and mine are mine. And so if I need nursing home care, her assets are protected. That is very, very false. Missouri Medicaid does not recognize prenups. So they are recognized in other facets of the legal world, but Missouri says if you're married, then it all goes into the pot to be counted up as countable. So if you have a prenup and that has been something in the back of your mind that you were relying on, probably need to revisit things. Putting your spouse's name on assets. So I had a guy recently who he had put everything in his wife's name. He's been diagnosed with cancer, put everything in his wife's name. A couple of years goes by, they decide to come in and see me. And I have to tell them that that really doesn't matter. It really didn't do anything because they're married. All of their assets are viewed as a unit and they're all countable. So that's not a good plan. I have to be broke. This is another myth. And I think I just hopefully dispelled that for you. You can have assets and we have ways of getting those assets over to your well spouse. So that is absolutely false. Medicare will pay for everything. Again, Medicare is only going to pay for the first 21 days of some rehabilitation. And then if you have a supplement, you might get up to 120 days, but you're going to have a copay. And I will say, it's interesting. I see people come in and they're like, well, we're on day 80. And I'm like, okay, well, what's your copay? And they're like, oh, it's $190 a day. I'm like, well, that's the same as the private pay rate. So a lot of people think that they're maybe getting some coverage with their Medicare supplement and they're not. So, but bottom line, Medicare is not going to pay indefinitely for your long-term care. I have a lot of people, their planning myth or their plan is, I'm a veteran, and I talked about that as well. So just because you're a veteran, I would not recommend you solely rely on those veterans benefits that are available. There are some good benefits out there that can help pay for some in-home health care and those types of things, but I don't think that that program is a great option if you have if you are married and you have a spouse. And there are, like I could do a whole talk on this, but there are asset and income restrictions with that VA program. And it is a lot harder to qualify for than it used to be, but I would not just say, hey, I'm going to the veterans home. That's my plan. I think that's you need to have a plan B and C. Another myth is I can give away $15,000 every year. My CPA told me I could. And that's fine if you're only worried about, the federal tax exclusion. But in the Medicaid world, they don't care about that. The Medicaid and the tax world don't go hand in hand. So giving the $15,000 away every year to children is, I would recommend before doing that, sit down and let's look at what does your picture look like as a whole, and is that a good idea? Another myth, the nursing home will take my house. This is my personal favorite. The nursing home is not taking your house. No one's taking your house. I also hear the state will take my house. No one is taking your house. Even if you're single, your home is still an exempt asset. Now the state can place a lien on it if you're single, but if you're married, your home is protected from a lien as long as your well spouse is still living in that home. The house becomes more of an issue if you are single and looking at the Medicaid benefit, but as long as the value of it is $600,000 or less, it is exempt. And even if the state does place a lien on it, the state's not coming in and taking it or making you move. It's just a lien that will sit there and accumulate based on the amount of care that was paid out. So, all right, I think that does it for me on the substance part. Lisa, if If time is good, are we able to do some questions?
Absolutely. And we do have one question that's been posted so far. And it
Okay.
said, the question is there a maximum amount that you can put into the Medicaid compliant annuity? Or is there a maximum amount that can be paid monthly?
That's a good question. So there is no maximum amount, and there is no maximum amount that you put into the annuity, and there's no maximum amount for income. However, this Medicaid compliant annuity is something that we fought very hard for in Missouri. And we're pretty friendly. The state's pretty friendly on it. And so we don't want to abuse it. What I will tell you is I have never purchased $1 million Medicaid compliant annuity, nor would I. I think it's something that we don't want to abuse. We don't want it taken away. We want to remember why it's there. And I think it's very situational. So if I have a husband who he has early onset dementia at 55 and is in a nursing home by the time he's 60, and let's say his wife is 50, so let's say she's 10 years younger than him and she's still working, and they may even have some kids at home. And I've had this case before. I've had these cases. I'm going to be more willing to purchase a larger Medicaid compliant annuity in that situation, because I'm well aware that she's probably going to live another 40 years. And we really need to make sure we're preserving assets for her. But we really just kind of situationally look at them. We don't want to abuse them. We typically run them 6 months. And there's no rule that says that we have to run them shorter or longer. We just have found we work with the state a lot, obviously, that's a nice, sweet spot for them. They don't really say anything. So, but there's not a lot of like, you can and you can't do this. They just want to make sure the contract is drafted in a certain way. So, okay.
The next question is, what are the biggest areas of conflict you see among family members related to these issues?
That's a really good question, and probably one I could write a book on someday. Typically, the more children, the more conflict, which probably goes without saying. If we are dealing with a family farm, there's typically a lot of conflict there, because it is if we have kids that are working the farm and maybe the daughters are the caregivers, then there's more of a control issue there. But it depends on the durable power of attorney too. If I have one child that's very responsible and he's the durable power of attorney, and then maybe we have some other kids that are not as responsible, they get worried that, this child is going to do something with their inheritance. I will tell you, a lot of the generation coming up is I see a lot of this is their inheritance that they're worried about. And that seems to be the driving force. But a lot of it's control. A lot of it is wanting things to be fair and just being in the know. So I always start out my meetings. If I have a child come in with a durable power of attorney and he allows his siblings or she allows her siblings to come in, and we don't have everybody at the table, we're going to have a conversation about that. We're going to find out, where's Mary, where's Cindy, where's, Bob, why are they not here? What's everybody's, how do we all get along? We have a long conversation about that. And we just try to work through it. But the more children, the more conflict.
Okay, another question is, this person asked, I'm guessing that a pay on death designation is different than putting a child's name on a deed.
Yes, it's very different. So from a probate avoidance standpoint, yes, if you don't have a trust or anything like that, and you just want to rely on beneficiary designations, that is a way to do that, is to have the name as pay on death or beneficiary deed or whatever type of asset it is. That does not create liability issues. It also doesn't have any bearing on Medicaid or long-term care planning. However, putting the child's name on there as an owner is something I strongly advise against doing. That is very different.
Okay, another one is, When should someone start looking at investing in long-term care insurance?
So in just talking with, colleagues in that industry, the sweet spot is before you hit 60 in terms of affordability. I do have a lot of people that purchase it in their 60s. It gets pretty cost prohibitive out of your 60s. And for the most part, like I said, I think everyone, it's not for everyone, and it kind of depends on what your assets are and what you have. But it definitely doesn't hurt to go look and get a quote. Your health could also affect things. If you're someone if you have high blood pressure in your 50s or diabetes or things like that, it can be really hard to qualify for. So that's why I say the earlier the better, because your health is a big factor as to whether or not you even qualify.
Okay, the next person that asked a question says, we have a farm. What's the benefit of having an irrevocable trust versus a revocable trust?
Okay, I'm glad you brought that up. So I meant to have that on my myths list. A revocable living trust is not an asset protection trust for long-term care or Medicaid purposes. Okay, that a revocable living trust means you're the trustee of that trust. You're also the beneficiary of that trust, and you're in complete control. It is not going to protect your farm in a long-term care situation. An irrevocable Medicaid asset protection trust could, if it was drafted properly and if it is being managed properly.
Okay, another question is, what is the easiest way to begin the Medicaid application process?
Well, assuming, so, and maybe I should clarify this. So to start the Medicaid application process, you or a loved one has to be in a facility that accepts Medicaid, which most of our facilities in this area do. But and this is, for vendor Medicaid, not health insurance. I guess I'm not quite clear on that question. If we're talking about, are they wanting to help doing it, or we're having someone else do it?
I'm not sure. If the person who asked the question would like to type in more clarification, I can present the question.
Okay.
And if you have any more questions, we're trying to go through. So far, we're keeping up. If you have any more questions. Okay, the person put the clarification on when the question was, what is the easiest way to begin the Medicaid application process? And the clarification point was for in-home health care.
Okay. So I didn't really get into the in-home healthcare part today. Everything, the Medicaid program that I talked about today was for if you're in a nursing home. There is it's called home and community-based waiver. There is a Medicaid program that can pay for that type of care. It's called a home and community-based waiver. It is very different. It does not pay for 24/7 care. It is, the state sends a contracted worker out to your home to assess the situation. You do, from an asset and financial standpoint, have to qualify the same way for that program that you do the vendor program. But the process is twofold because someone has to actually come out and do an evaluation. As far as the easiest way to do that, we work with that program and I could take a look at it. If it's a pretty cut and dry situation where you're already qualified, then I would defer to maybe your worker to help you with it. But that's a program we work with as well. So it's just a little harder to qualify for.
Okay, does anyone else have any other questions? I think so far Lori has answered everything that I've seen come in. We'll give you a couple of more minutes to see if anybody presents any more questions. Give you a couple more minutes. I do not see it.
Okay, I was gonna just point out though, if you do have something that comes up later, we do have a free consultation. So, and we do Zoom meetings, telephone meetings. And so if something does come up and it's very situational, I know sometimes these things are hard. someone just asked what the cost of a consultation was.
Lori, would you want to go ahead and share your email or telephone number in case
Yeah.
people want to write that down? Or I don't know how you find the links, if those are on Facebook, but you might want to share how they can find additional information from you.
Yeah, so our office number here is, our main office is 417-868-8200. And like I said, we do offer a free consultation, and we can do that in person, by telephone, or Zoom. We have offices in Lebanon, Marshfield, Bolivar, Branson, Joplin, Springfield, Nixa, Ozark. And our website is Ozarks, and make sure you get the S on there, OZARKS, elderlaw.com. And there's also, if you go to that link, there is a way to set up an appointment or request an appointment as well. And then there's just a lot of good information on that website as well.
Awesome. Lori, thank you so much. This information has been very enlightening. It's so informative. And I know many of us are getting to the age that we either are having to deal with these for our parents, or we can see it's on the horizon, and that we want to plan ahead and be ready for these types of issues. So I truly appreciate it, and I'm sure all of our participants do as well. So thanks for taking your time and sharing your knowledge with us.
Yeah. All right. Thank you for
And
having
by the way,
me.
I'm not really on the beach. I just want to be on the beach. So thank you all for attending, and let us know if there's anything that we can do for you. Thank you.